Good evening to all my friends in Manipur, in the plains, in the hills, wherever they be, and to the diaspora in Delhi, whether they are displaced or they have made a partial home in Delhi over the last few years. In Delhi itself, the day is being observed in many places. There's a candlelight event at the Sacred Heart Cathedral in the very heart of Delhi. There was a meeting which has just concluded in the Center of Equity Studies where secular people from very young to very old participated, and which was on Facebook across the country. So this is the sort of diverse people who are coming in solidarity with the people of Manipur in their search for peace. And I use the term people advisedly because peace involves all elements. It involves the government of India, which has so far made no real effort to bring peace in Manipur, which must have been discussed here before I entered. The state government, which again has made no genuine effort at peace, whose presence may be felt slightly in the valley, but is non-existent in the hills, where 60,000 or more people are displaced and living in refugee camps, in church compounds. Saidaji, Harshmandar, I, at various times, have visited those camps. I and Harsh together. We visited camps also in Imphal. I have known Manipur over the last 50 years or so as a correspondent. I visited it again and again, looking for news, trying to understand developments, good or bad, as they take place. I've driven along the Burma Road from Manipur deep into Burma and come back. We have been to the borders and seen the situation. We have been to the internal borders where valley meets the hills. On one side, the Meiteis, on two other sides, the Nagas and the Kukizo group of sub-tribes which inhabit that section of the hills adjoining Burma.
They are not close yet.
We know the ground situation as much as any outsider can ever know because we don't live there 24/7. We observe, we listen to people, we listen to government sources, we listen to church sources, to political sources, to women groups. We get an idea from various viewpoints, from various ears, from various eyes. But ours is not a lived experience. Ours is an outsider's experience. So whatever we preach in terms of peace carries that element of objectiveness, which is also an element of ignorance. Because I am not totally privy to what is going on now, for instance, because it is my understanding as a correspondent, as an observer across the world. I've been to trouble spots in Sri Lanka, in Vietnam, in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Far East. Whenever there is trouble, it is not a total cessation of dialogue. Obviously, people who are in refugee camps are only partly privy to it. Obviously, those who are speaking for them from all the various camps are speaking in a public posture. But I would refuse to believe that common good sense, common human interests, common human instincts are not also operative. That everybody involved in this terrible, terrible, terrible confrontation is not yearning for peace. if they were not listening to gospels or if they're not listening to leaders, they'd be seeing the pitiable situation in which the people are. Lack of food, lack of Medicare, lack of a home, the mellowness, the warmth of a home, lack of interesting conversations with your folks. Here is a situation where thousands of students are not studying, and a situation where thousands of teachers are without jobs. Students are not able to study, teachers don't have a job. And that is the situation in many professions. There are no jobs because people are living in refugee camps. Who's paying the salaries? They're not getting salaries. The institutions, the work they were doing is without them. The economic interest dictates that peace return as fast as possible. The political interest dictates that peace returns as fast as possible. Look at this terrible situation. We're in the midst of a general election. People are expected to vote. People belonging to the ruling party in India, people belonging to others who want to replace the ruling party in India, would like a general election because they can participate. And yet an opportunity is passing them by to express their thoughts and the demands at this moment, because the demands of this moment are not going to be the demands of 4 years ago or the demands that they're written about the last 2 years. These are demands with their current crisis, demands when they go home, where will they go? To the plains where their camps were, where the homes were, or would they have to be resettled elsewhere? Basic critical questions. Will they get back their jobs? Private sector, public sector? Will there be micro industries? Will they again be participants, particularly in the areas where they had businesses which had jobs at the crossings and so on and so forth? So the economic interest, the political interest, and above all, the human interest. The child would like to play safely, like to go to school. The pregnant mother would want a safe delivery. For the past 1 year, even when we were there, children were being born. Many pregnant women were suffering because there were no good medicines. The humane interest. We discovered, the doctors who were with us when they were in the refugee camps, discovered a terrible situation. They spoke of an immediate and a long-term human tragedy preparing itself. Because when newborns are born with a vitamin deficiency, what is going to happen to the mental growth? When they're 5 years old, when they start going to school. The other aspect of the humaneness of the people, the trauma that they have suffered. We met a man who was in the morgue. He was in the mortuary given up for dead, and he woke up and he came back. He was not in his real senses when he was talking to us. There are people and people again who are suffering from post-traumatic distress, men and women, cookies, so smart, mighties, who have seen violence before their eyes. They have not participated in the violence. All of them are victims and they suffer from the trauma. I cannot dream of what they are dreaming, what nightmares the children are facing. In the daytime, they may look nice and jolly in the sunshine, but when the darkness comes and they go to bed, what comes before their eyes? What murder and rapine and fire and running into forests they have seen. How can I even dream of it, sitting in the safety and the security of New Delhi? Is anybody addressing that trauma? Those are the human aspect which cries out for a peace process. And now let me come to the crucial point, and I will stop after that. Crucial point is, how should peace processes be initiated? It has to be a peace with dignity. It has to be a peace with a long tenure of peace, not peace that has to be repeated process has to be repeated every 3 months or 6 months. Ground rules have to be laid. The issues have to be defined. That requires political maturity. That requires political will. The ruling parties, the opposition parties at the state, the MLAs who are, for instance, the Kuki MLAs, 10 of them, and there was no parliament, there were not participants in the short-term assembly session that was held. How will they participate? How will the representatives of the Kukis participate in the peace process? How will various groups of the Maithis and the Nagas, who have been neutral at this time, be participants in this peace process? That requires and that places a terrific demand on the talent in the governance system. The bureaucrats, the police, the secret services, and above all, the political parties, the chief minister. So far, they have shown no political will towards our political solution. Parliament itself has failed to persuade the higher powers to take a more personal interest, to take a more deeper hands-on interest in the peace process. This peace process, as I said, would have to recognize the citizenship of all people. You cannot traumatize a community. You cannot label it and label it in a terrible manner. Give a dog a bad name and you might as well hang him. That is an old British saying. What is true of that is more true of human beings. You cannot label human beings. You cannot call them so and so. You cannot call them smugglers. You cannot call them drug merchants. You cannot call them land grabbers. You cannot call them, above all, foreigners. I was reading a book on the Kuki War of almost 100 years ago. It was the Kukis, let me remind everybody, who can claim proudly that they could challenge the British and defeat them, who could say that their ancestors fought a war far more actively, far more face-to-face, far more in the case of real threat than any other human rights struggle or freedom struggle could possibly have, apart from the larger struggles against the British police that Gandhi and Nehru faced. The Kukis and the Nagas and the Metis have a proud past. They may have had periods of antagonism, but they have also long periods of living together. They've been hospitable people when other people were in distress. They have been, how should I say, nice people, even as displaced person. We have seen them displaced in Delhi. Any other community would have lost their self-respect, but not the Kukis, not the Hamars, not the Zos. They have maintained their presence in these places with great and consummate dignity. With the young men and women who have gone to schools and colleges in the church areas of South India, of Delhi and so on, have not lost their dignity. And I think that is a very important point. It's also a very strong point in saying that these are a people who are willing to sit down with you and talk. How can they go home? How can they claim equity and participation as equals in the development process of the state and of this country, where all of us are participants? How can they see and be assured that their citizenship will never be questioned? How can they say that their identity as human beings, that their identities as citizens will never be challenged, will never be given a bad name? Towards this, I think we throw a challenge to the government in Imphal and in New Delhi, a challenge, an exhortation, and an appeal to start now the political peace process which will end this tragedy in an important, a very pretty state of this country, a borderline state, a border state, which needs development, which needs capital to come in, which needs projects to be started, which needs employment to be. That those wonderful people once again start that process of living in peace together, developing themselves, working for their own benefits, and in that process, assuring all of us the process of development of peace, towards which end elections are supposed to be there. It is a pity that Manipur is not an election point, but it is a point of discussion and emphasis in our hearts. I have written, and many people have written, many articles over the last 12 months, more so today. And therefore, once again, I assure you of my prayers, I assure you of my vigilance, I assure you of my labors as a writer, as an activist, to work towards a lasting peace, to work towards a welfare, and to work towards an overall integrity and identity. I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dayalji. Thank you for those words of